Hello and welcome to the Geek's Review. I'm Royce.
I'm Matt.
I'm Holly.
I'm Aaron.
Today we're going to be discussing musicals. Musicals, I'm not a fan, but these guys are. They love musicals. That's not a thing. I'm just saying they know stuff. And they're here to talk about stuff about musicals. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to be discussing musicals old and new. And to start us off today, we have...
So for context, we're talking about movie musicals, not just wider stage productions.
If it was musicals, we could talk all day.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, we'd be here all
It's
week.
important to make the distinction because we actually discovered we had trouble explaining to Royce what a musical actually is.
Right,
Yeah,
did you really?
A movie musical is... There's a lot of, especially in older cinema, there's a lot of movies that have musical numbers.
Yes.
Doesn't necessarily make it a musical. The ones that we were throwing around was like the Jerry Lewis Dean Martin films and that kind of thing. And we talked briefly about Phantom in Paradise, which I know you want to...
I haven't
Phantom
seen
in the
it.
Paradise was really something.
I've
really
got friends
something.
who love it, but I haven't seen it. So, I did assume it was one because a musical. I mean, you're the expert. Define a musical for us.
So in terms of a musical in film, a musical, I would say, as a film, would be a story where the music within the film moves the plot along. It's diegetic.
Yep.
So
Non-diegetic.
Non-diegetic, sorry.
Within a story, if something is diegetic, the characters know it's happening.
Yes.
But if it's non-diegetic, it's used to represent something. So as we talked about last week, Get On Up, the singing in that is diegetic because James Brown is singing.
Performing
But
live, yeah.
in Les Miserables, which has hardly any spoken dialogue, I don't think it has any spoken dialogue, the singing in that is non-diegetic because the music represents action and speech, but it's the characters, they're not singing, but the performers are singing.
There are some that differ from that rule. Like there are certain musicals where you do have people singing songs live, but they do still serve a purpose with the story, like Mamma Mia with Super Trooper. That song, it still serves to a point in the film or in the musical, but it is also the characters performing within their story.
But then if you got something like Jersey Boys, that's less non-diegetic because it's them actually just putting their songs together.
Yeah. Where we want to start, we'd probably want to start where musicals kind of first came into the cinema,
Take us
which is
back
the
to the
golden
beginning.
age of musicals, which is usually described to be about from the 1940s to the 1960s, although there are some great musicals that are put into film later than that as well.
Wouldn't you say it started in the late 20s when sound came in and people were like, oh, what sound should we put with movies? Singing.
Yeah, it was a bit more difficult back then, though, because it wasn't as refined, and they only really started getting mass-produced as movie musicals in the 40s. So that's when most historians canonically say that the musical theatre golden age began for film. So there's some big names that pretty much everybody knows who's ever listened to anything to do with old cinema, which is, Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, Judy Garland. There's a lot of big names that you'd associate with that era. But one of the big things I notice about that era is that a lot of the stuff that you see these days doesn't quite have the same punch. And that's gonna make me sound elitist, being like, oh, it was better back then. But a good example would be, and I showed Royce this earlier, The Jump and Jive from Stormy Weather, which was a 1943 musical that was probably the first real instance of African-American performers getting their own full-length feature film. And that features Cab Calloway, who's a very well-known composer, conductor, and jazz singer, and the Nicholas brothers, who not many people know, but if you've seen the new Aladdin, there's a moment in it where in Never Had a Friend Like Me, they jump down and they do the splits in front of each other. It's at the very end. You ain't never split, had a split, friend split, like split. And that's based off the Nicholas brothers in this film, where they go down a big flight of pretty chunky stairs, jumping, and then they just go straight into the splits over each other and over each other and over each other.
With no CGI.
With no CGI.
No wires.
Sorry to spoil the magic, but in Aladdin there is in fact CGI, because I don't know whether Will Smith would be able to do that. I mean, props if he could. I mean, Will Smith can pretty much do anything at this point, but, don't know whether that's really in his wheelhouse. But yeah, like things like that, where there are these amazing physical feats because these dancers were just so prominent and they got all of this training, and a lot of them were self-taught too, because especially back then, before Gene Kelly's era, there was a big stigma around men doing ballet and men doing dance training. And then you have someone like Gene Kelly who goes out and does a whole tap routine on roller skates.
Yeah.
Like, that's in It's Always Fair Weather. How someone has the core strength to do a full tap dance on roller skates, I will never understand. But it's that big spectacle of these amazing, talented performers that, I mean, these days, most of the movie musicals are more focused on the story, which I'm fine with. You know, some of the stories from the old musicals are not great. Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, I'm looking at you.
Bless your beautiful heart.
Do you wanna bring out the dirty laundry from Seven Brides for Seven Brothers?
Okay, I love Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, but only for the music, and the dancing is incredible. The feats of strength. There's the barn raising dance and that whole scene where, you know, they have people just like rolling on logs and jumping over axes and flipping over tables.
It's all real.
It's all real. There's obviously no CGI. Because
I imagine the axes were blunt.
Yeah. But yeah, like these incredible dancers just doing these massive feats of just acrobatic genius. But the story. Oh boy.
Let's go steal some women to marry.
Yeah, let's go nick some women to marry and then give them Stockholm syndrome so that they love us forever and ever and ever. And then the ending is like, whose baby is that? From like the bunch of women and the one woman who's actually married and happily married to her husband.
Oh,
and they all go, it's mine! So they can stay with their captors.
Oh,
and
dear.
it's like, oh, guys.
It's also a bit like The Music Man, another film from that era where...
Be a douchebag and you'll get the girl.
Yeah, exactly. He's a con man who tries to sell musical instruments to a town and then leave with the money before the instruments arrive. And the one person in town who doesn't believe him is a very beautiful young librarian. And she works it out, but by the end, she's so charmed by him that she convinces the town that it's okay that he didn't teach them how to play their instruments.
The best part of that is at the end, they're like, oh, you have to play to prove to us that you've learnt something. And the kids do the most awful rendition of Minuet in G. It's the la-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da, la-di-da, la-di-da. And all of these kids, it's like, and it's awful. But all of the townsfolk are like, oh my god, they did something. Like, they're just
Look
so
at my
happy.
boy playing
And
the
they
instrument up
forget.
there.
They forget about all of the stuff that this guy has done and like how he was just going to skip out on town with all of their money. And they're like, oh, you did it. You taught our kids how to blow into an instrument. Good job.
So what year was that?
62.
62.
Right, so a bit into it.
Yeah.
Because very early on, I mean, stage was such a commanding, medium for entertainment for so long that when film came about, it dealt a lot with sound stages. It dealt a lot with, translating musicals to the screen, which is mostly just filming it as if it was on the stage, but they had, they could enclose the sets a bit more and they could get away with doing more stuff. It wasn't really until, the cinematic language really evolved that you had more experimental films where, especially nowadays when you go and have big musicals, it's really about the cinematography and the special effects, less about the human performances, which is really the key feature of those early films, like you just said, where it's purely just guys jumping off stairs, going into splits, sliding down in splits on massive banisters.
Yeah.
Whereas
Just
now
being
it's
Donald
all...
O'Connor having to do the same dance sick.
With a broken back.
Yeah.
With a broken back.
Well, not a broken back, but very badly damaged. If anyone's seen Singing in the Rain, Donald O'Connor, he's one of my favourite performers of that generation. He's right up there with Gene Kelly, despite often being Gene Kelly's side man. He does make him laugh, which is just a monolith of a performance to do. Nobody can do his performance fully live. It's impossible. But they filmed it, and at the very end, he does these flips off walls. He goes, make 'em laugh, and then runs and does a flip off another wall. Make 'em laugh, goes and runs, does a flip off another wall, and full runs up them. But they filmed it, and then he was bedridden for like 6 days after that, and then they had to go back and reshoot them because the film was foggy. And he'd also damaged his back and other things. He was also smoking like 6 packs a day. So that probably didn't help. He's admitted to that was...
It was the 50s, don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry
That's
about
why
it.
the film was foggy.
But yeah, and so the absolute feats that these people performed. But what I really want to talk about is a musical that is very divided among people. I personally don't particularly like it. I may be biased because I've been in a production of it. Guys and Dolls. So, Guys and Dolls was a 1955 movie musical based on a 1950 stage musical that came out. It was the director, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, I think is his name. I may have absolutely butchered that. He directed this film, and it stars Marlon Brando singing as Sky Masterson. It stars Frank Sinatra, who we all love, as Nathan. It stars Gene Simmons as Sarah, who's a missionary. And it stars Vivian Blaine, who was the original Broadway actress for this role as Miss Adelaide, who's your typical whiny, annoying, incredible character. So the basic story is that there's a guy who runs an illegal crap game, because of course he does, and he's engaged to this woman, Miss Adelaide, who works at I guess it's a showgirl club, a Kit Kat club, I suppose, and he has been with her for 14 years and refuses to marry her, and she's getting over it very quickly. So much so that she's had to write to her mother and tell her that they've been happily married for 7 years and have 5 kids together. And she's gotten so over it that she actually now is psychosomatically sick, and she constantly has a cold from being so stressed that she's not married. Problematic, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 leads are Marlon Brando as Sky and Sarah, who is a missionary, who she's trying to keep her mission afloat. Not going too well. And so he makes a bet with her that if she goes out on a date with him to win another bet, it's all very complicated.
He's a serial gambler.
He's a serial gambler, and he never loses, basically.
The antithesis of a missionary.
And so to get the money that he needs to put on this crap game, Nathan says to Sky, you need to take this woman to Havana, whoever I choose, and then if you do that, you win. If you don't win, you have to give me the money. And Sky goes, okay, pick her. And of course, Nathan, being a cheeky little shit, picks the most stuck-up, stuffy woman he can find. And so in retaliation for that, Sky goes, well, you go on a date with me, I will bring you sinners to your mission so that your mission doesn't get shut down. And she goes, oh, kind of got to then, don't I? And then wacky hijinks ensue. They fall in love. Nathan stops being a dick and actually marries his wife. And they all live happily ever after, the end. It's an interesting show.
I'd never actually heard that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the plot.
Yeah. Welcome.
Wait, have you seen it?
No.
Oh.
I've only seen the bits of footage you guys have shown me.
Yeah.
It's new to me.
So that's basically what Guys and Dolls is. Watch the film. It's actually got some really good moments. Vivian Blaine is a standout. She was perfect for the role. I mean, she originated it on Broadway. So if they had have chosen anyone else, they're actually looking at Marilyn Monroe. And she would have done a great job too.
Yes.
And also she and Frank Sinatra were very, very close. He nearly married her. But yeah, no, Vivian Blaine is the absolute standout of the show. Now, what Guys and Dolls did do for the Hollywood industry was begin one of the longest running feuds of all time between Marlon Brando and Frank Sinatra. Marlon Brando, we all know, big film actor, has a great history behind him, is very much that like leading man kind of swagger, kind of vibes. Can't sing, which is kind of an issue when you're doing a musical. And Frank Sinatra, as we all know, can sing, but they decided to cast Frank as the character who gets one song in the original stage production.
Oh.
And who is also meant to be a funny Jewish character. So for context, Nathan Lane played him in a recent version of it. So he's meant to be this very nervous, neurotic, Jewish, like very out there kind of, not necessarily the brightest spark, but he gets it done. He's very crafty. To which, obviously, Frank Sinatra is the kind of Italian mob boss who acts like he's in the mafia. Very smooth, very wonderful. He's great.
Basically,
He's great.
Sky Masterson in real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Frank Sinatra wanted to play Sky,
Yes.
but they refused to let him. The producer, who is...
A bastard.
Calling him out.
Yeah, let's dox this guy from 1955.
But the original writer, Frank Lesser, he wanted the original from Broadway to
Yes.
come over and do Nathan.
As is the way, yes.
Because, duh. And he would have been perfect. Like, he was already perfect because he did the original production. But the producers at the time said no because they wanted Frank Sinatra because big name, you know, blah, blah, blah. And they wanted Marlon Brando as Sky. Frank really wanted Sky.
Understandable.
But, like, really wanted... And so he hated Marlon Brando for years after this. He hated him. But Frank Sinatra's not great in this film either. Because he plays this neurotic Jewish man. And there's a quote here from one of the producers who was saying that you can't hire the original, which was Sam Levine. And he said, "You can't have a Jew playing a Jew. It wouldn't work on screen."
What?
Hey?
What?
That's a genuine quote from the producer who was demanding to have Frank Sinatra play this character.
Sorry, Larry David.
Who only sings once in the original production. So they actually added in an extra song for him. So they added this beautiful song, Adelaide, which is a stunning, stunning, stunning song. But it shouldn't have been in there in the first place. Why was it there? And the original guy who wrote the show, Frank Lesser, he hated Frank Sinatra's portrayal of Nathan so much that he never watched it.
Oh.
He died in 1968 and he
God.
refused to watch it up until his death.
Well, like Frank Sinatra probably just didn't care enough.
No, because
to
he
put in
didn't
a
get
good
the role he
performance.
wanted.
No.
He was like, I'm just going to half-ass it.
Yeah, because he was at that point, he was pretty high up. You know, it was a little bit later in his career. He could have gotten any role he wanted, but for some reason, Marlon Brando,
because-
that bastard,
Just because
got
he's
the
in
role
Streetcar
over it.
Named Desire, get out of here.
Yeah,
The
basically.
thing is, Marlon Brando was great in his wheelhouse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was the great broody leading, but it wasn't Sky.
Atonal.
Ugh. There's a lot of changes from the musical to the film. I'm not a fan of the musical in general. I think it's pretty boring. I think it's got great songs. I think Adelaide's a great character. One day I wish to play her. But being in the musical, it's kind of boring.
For the ensemble.
For no, just even to watch. It's one of those ones that you'd want to be in because it's got fun moments. But watching it is a very different.
I do have to admit, when I saw your production, I was very bored.
Thanks. Oh, that's great. I
Oh, no.
stripped for you. What do you mean? For context, I was one of the hot box girls. I was one of the strippers. Mimi was my name. I'd lost my earring. It was a big thing. And I got to rip up it was fun because I got to just rip off this dress and just like with studs down the side, and I got to just rip it off and then tap dance, and it was a whole big thing. But they cut a lot of songs out of the musical version, out of the movie, sorry, and they added in new songs which were they were all right. Adelaide, great song. I'm glad they added it. But they shouldn't have needed to add it in the first place. But Frank Sinatra was like, I only sing in one song. I'm a crooner. That's what I do.
I'm Frank Sinatra.
And they were like, oh, should probably put something in there for you.
You're hiring me for the wrong job, buddy.
Yeah. And so Adelaide is this beautiful... He ended up playing it like a very smooth-talking Italian man. Because that's what Frank Sinatra does.
Man.
A man. And so it's this beautiful... croony song that they added, and it's lovely, but again, didn't need to be there. There's a song in the original stage production which annoys the living hell out of me. It's called A Bushel and a Peck. If you've ever heard this song, it is the most repetitive, annoying thing on the planet, and it's sung by the Hotbox Girls, and it's just this weird... I love you, a bushel and a peck, a bushel and a peck, and a hug around the neck. Yeah, it's not good. So they replaced that in the movie, which I was so thankful for, with Pet Me Popper, is what it's called. Oh, just you wait. It's they're all dressed as cats.
Oh no.
They're these
Oh, good
strippers. They're these, 1950s strippers dressed as cats.
Oh dear, get Tom Hooper away from it.
Ooh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it was Cats the Musical before that came out. Yes, they've got all the little things, and it's like, it's a cheeky little, pet me, papa, kind of like weird thing. It's actually really fun, though, because it describes what Adelaide does. She's this, nightclub hotbox singer. Describes what she does, shows exactly what she does, shows what kind of person she is. It's a great song. And then they added a new song for Marlon Brando. Because, fun fact, Marlon Brando couldn't sing half the songs that his character was meant to sing. Again, why did they cast Marlon Brando? Why not cast Frank Sinatra, who could sing all of those songs in Marlon...
It's like Sky's most famous song, Luck Be a Lady, is like taken down.
Luck Be a Lady is taken down like 5 steps. And it's really dumb. And then Frank Sinatra afterwards, just to rub it in Marlon Brando's face, releases his own version of Luck Be a Lady.
The best version.
And
best
it's
version,
the best
yeah.
version that someone's recorded. And I don't understand. A Woman in Love is the song that they added for him. And all I had to say was meh, 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 meh. And if they were going to put it in, he should have been dubbed. Just putting it out there, Marlon Brando should have been dubbed, which was a very common practice in those early films. So yeah, they cut out a couple of really, really good songs, like Never Been in Love Before, which is the actual Sky song, which is stunning. More I Cannot Wish You is the typical, the dad song. Like, she has a dad character who's like, more I cannot wish you than to wish you find your love, and I just want you to be happy. Beautiful, beautiful song. If you've seen the Flash musical episode, it's in that. Would recommend listening to that. Marry the Man Today. We all have feelings about that song. But it's funny. Like, it is a funny song. It's at the very end where the girls both go, we're not going to be able to change them before we marry them, so might as well marry them now and then change them after we've married them.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Again, problematic. It was the 50s. Welcome.
Women, am I right?
Hey, no.
But,
Women.
yeah, and so they got rid of that, which is kind of a shame because it is kind of funny. And it does tie up those loose ends of, like, why would they marry these guys when they're such screw-ups? Like, it's actually just them being like, we'll marry them, and then we'll deal with them later. And, yeah, Nathan only has 2 songs in the original. Well, he actually only has 1 song. But then they've added him into Guys and Dolls, which defeats the whole purpose of his character, because Guys and Dolls is just basically a number where 2 of the characters talk about how dumb men are for doing everything for their doll. Like, how, like, they'll, like, go shopping for them and carry all their stuff and, they'll do all these dumb things to impress their dolls and stuff. And the whole point is that Nathan is trying to suck up to his fiancé and being like, I will marry you one day. I will, I promise. And the guy's like, God, you're a simp. It's basically that if you did Guys and Dolls, that song today, it'd be like the simps only doing it for their girl. Like, yeah, the simps are doing it for their thoughts. That would be the song.
I think to sum it up in a modern context, this sort of sounds like it was a Zack Snyder approach to making this film. Misunderstanding the source material.
Yes,
Stuff that doesn't need to be
if
there.
the original writer refuses to watch the film, you haven't done a great job.
It really is. I mean, Alan Moore refused to watch Watchmen.
Yeah.
There you go.
Roald Dahl hated Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, well. Yeah.
So did I, though.
Yeah. Like, the only example of that I can think of where the movie was actually good is Mary Poppins. But that's just because she was really, really salty that they changed her characters, which, fair enough.
Yeah.
All in all, Guys and Dolls is not a great film. They cast the wrong people. Would still recommend watching it because some things are really cool. They have a whole crap game that's a ballet. Don't know why, but sure. Singing isn't great. Frank Sinatra is good. Vivian Blaine, just watch it for her. She's adorable. That's it, Guys and Dolls.
So a few weeks ago, Josh and I, we went and reviewed Westworld and Future World, which featured Yul Brynner. And I did have a throwaway comment there that we would review The King and I, which is Yul Brynner's big, crowning achievement. And so today I'm going to just briefly discuss the film, which I watched for the first time, but it was always on Channel 7, midday movies. It was always playing. Just a small thing here, it was actually filmed in Cinemascope, which is ridiculously widescreen. And this was cropped to be 16 by 9, which is your standard sort of widescreen. But they do a lot of pan and scan in the one that's on YouTube, which is quite annoying. But I guess also watching it back in the day on your TV, it would have been like 4:3 anyway, so you wouldn't have got...
Black bars cutting out.
Oh, if you were lucky, yeah. Oh, that would have been like real letterbox. That would have been literal letterbox, yeah. And going back very briefly to Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, that was actually filmed twice in 4:3 and Cinemascope. So there's 2 versions of the film. What's notable is there is one scene when they arrive home and there's a chicken on the table and he brushes it off, and I think in the Cinemascope it's a white chicken and in the 4:3 it's a brown chicken.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, they did film that film twice.
Yeah, everything was twice done, I think, except for one of the big dance sequences,
Yeah.
which they just couldn't afford to do twice.
Yeah, so they just cropped it. But yeah, The King and I is a Hammerstein and...
Rogers and Hammerstein.
You're the expert here.
Hammerstein and Rogers.
Oh, that sounds weird.
So yeah, it was a big musical. Deborah Kerr, who doesn't actually do her own singing. It was Ghost sung by Marnie Nixon, who did Audrey Hepburn in a few films. She also did Deborah Kerr in An Affair to Remember as well. But this shares similarities to another Rodgers and Hammerstein musical, which is The Sound of Music, which I think is a fantastic film as well. But when you break them down to their core components, it's about a red-haired lady who who travels a great distance to look after a grumpy man's many children and tutor them. And there's also a sort of secret romance, and she comes to charm him and be charmed by him. That's if you break it down to the bare essentials. This film is entertaining on many levels. I did quite enjoy it. There is a music number or two, a prolonged play scene which goes for about 13 minutes, which was very painful to watch, I will admit. It's very... Yellowface is, I guess, a term. It's a sort of a link that comes off the Wikipedia page, which is sort of a weird term to use. I don't want to say it again. But it is set in Siam, which is modern-day Thailand. And you've got Yul Brynner, who is a Russian-American actor, who did actually play this role for 5 years previous to this, and he's since gone on to play 4,165 times or something. He is ingrained in this. And Deborah Kerr was a film edition, because the original actress on Broadway actually passed away a year into production.
Yeah.
This is a film that is, like, it's very much from those early days where it's very theatrical still. It's all on sound stages. There's no, sweeping shots of the Alps like you have with Sound of Music. And
There wouldn't be any shots of the Alps in Siam.
well, why not? Just say it's the Siamese mountains or whatever. They do have a discussion about snow in so that's something. I did find some of the songs to be a little clunky. Like, they're not perfect. They're nice songs, but they're not, like, perfect. They're sort of like, this feels a little awkward.
Yeah.
Just like, I mean, you're talking about how its characters expressing their emotions. And it's a bit like Ham-Fisted. The Getting to Know You song, which is actually where that song comes from, which, I mean, even I knew.
Getting to know you, getting to know all about you.
Probably the best song in the entire thing, and it's probably why it's so long-lasting. But yeah, like I said, there is some unintentional humour here where the king is just so set in his ways, and there's a moment where he literally gets Anna out of bed to argue with her about the Bible.
Yeah.
You could very easily make a parody of this, where it's just a lot more literal, a lot more blunt.
King and I has some really beautiful moments, though.
It does.
It's a classic Rodgers and Hammerstein where it has really lovely parts to it. Like I think where it differs from Sound of Music, it's very similar thematically. But the other wives of the king, there's a whole racial discussion that we could have about this film that is too much to go into, especially for people who are not people of colour. But it's a whole big mess. You touched on it with our good friend who is not, in fact, any Asian descent, but still plays an Asian character. One of the big notes is the wives that he has, and the actual emotional weight of one of his wives. She has a beautiful solo.
Yes.
That I think, do you remember that? Because she just keeps being replaced by all of his wives and concubines. Which is why there are so many kids. He's not just uber horny like a certain other very kiddly man that we have in another film. It's really sad.
It is a classic for a reason. And it's definitely, it's a big crowd pleaser, I would say. It was interesting to finally watch it after 20-something years of knowing about it on, midday Channel 7 showings. So that's all we have for today. We'll be back next week to continue our discussion going through the decades into movie musicals. I'm Royce.
I'm Matt.
I'm Holly.
And I'm Aaron.
And we'll be back next week.